Thank you for joining us today. I am your host, Keonte Coleman, and you're watching Breaking News with Media Leaders. I can't tell you how happy I am to have our guest in today. We are joined by, let me bring him in, Mr. Hank Price. Hank Price is a media consultant, longtime GM in the television, broadcast television news, and he's an author. He's done pretty much everything. He's a thought leader within this world. So I'm so thankful that you've agreed to join me today to answer a few questions and hopefully help some people navigate this field.
Well, thank you. I'm pleased to be here, Keonte. Thank you so much for inviting me.
No problem. One thing that I like to do at the beginning of each show is to have have the guests situate themselves.
Yeah.
And I want to have you tell us about yourself, where you're from, your journey that got you into television.
I was born in Jackson, Mississippi. I was raised in Gulfport. When I was 2 years old, I had polio. The reason I tell you that, my whole time growing up, I would have a series of operations that required me to spend. And so we had this little 17-inch TV. This was 1950. And we had one television station, and that was WDSU TV. And I watched that station from sign on to sign off, and it was a great station, incredibly progressive. They had local news, they had local programming in the morning, an hour show at noon, programming in the afternoon. They were everything that was great. And occasionally they would refer to someone called the general manager. Now, I didn't know who that was, but I knew that was the person in charge, and I wanted that job. And so that's who, at 8 years old, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to run WDSU. Now, I never ran WD, uh, but uh, but that station inspired me, and so I was very fortunate. I went to the University of Southern Mississippi, got a first job in Jackson at the CBS affiliate, went from there to Huntsville, Alabama, to West Palm Beach. Like so many people, paid my dues, worked my way up, starved for the first 10 years. My wife and I, there were times we'd barely make. And then I got offered a job by a consulting company called Frank Mag. And I went to work for them, and that was like getting the match because I got to fly all over the country. I met people, and I got to work with these people. The other consultants were incredible. Most of them were a lot smarter than I was, but I learned so much. Eventually, I was just exhausted, had to get off the road. I took a job as the program director at the ABC affiliate in Washington. Uh, that station was in a lot of trouble, and so they started firing people. My boss got fired. About that time, the CBS station offered me a job as vice president of program and marketing. So I was at the ABC affiliate in Washington, D.C., and then at the CBS, and then the Gannett company bought this, and they made me a general manager in Greensboro. The dream job I'd always wanted. It was everything I hoped it would be. You know, running a TV station is about, if you do it, you're really fortunate. It's about 80% fun, about 5% misery, and about 15% sheer terror. So, uh, one of the things I had markets I had consulted uh, earlier was Minneapolis. Uh, uh, Gannett owned the NBC affiliate there. It was in trouble. They needed somebody to go. I was perfectly happy in Greensboro, but I got sent to Minneapolis, 16th Market, 14th Market. Great team. I had so much fun in there. We were there 5 years. I loved it. My wife hated everything about it. So she couldn't get out of bed at times. And she couldn't communicate with people. She'd go to McDonald's, offer of order a cup of coffee. They said, "Oh yeah, yeah, betcha. Here's your Coca-Cola." Oh. Anyway, I got recruited by CBS actually to go run KCBS, and I turned that job down because we had moved our kids. I just couldn't move up to LA. And so instead they sent me to Chicago and that station, WBBM. Uh, and I was there for a number of years, had a great time. Uh, Promised my wife someday we'd go back south. And in 2000, Viacom bought CBS, and I had been working with the Media Management Center just a little bit at Northwestern University, which is really owned by the Kellogg, jointly by the Kellogg Business School and the Dill, and so doing executive education. So I made an agreement with them that I would going to go to work for them for an executive education. I had spent 3 years on campus, and my wife said, "That's great, but I'm moving to North Carolina now." So we went to North. I went to work for the Hearst Corporation. They let me still work for Northwestern. Had a great time, just wonderful place to live. From there, we decided we'd build a retirement home back home in Mississippi. And so first bought the NBC affiliate in Birmingham. So I went and, did some preliminary work. And that's a lot more than you want to know, but that's my life story.
No, I think that's wonderful. The reason why I want to do that, to start us off that way, it helps anybody that's going to watch this to understand where you're coming from, the amount of knowledge, the different places.
Yeah.
Like until, kind of reading through your bio, I didn't know about the Magid portion of it. So it's interesting to hear you kind of say how that helped broaden your horizons with looking at news, because you were able to go into so many different stations.
Yeah, I tell people I spent years with that company, uh, kind of helping homogenize news, and then I've spent all the time since then trying to fix it. So anyway, you and I worked together, and we
Yeah,
had a great time. We recruited you from Jackson, the great Hearst television station there.
yeah,
Glad to have you till we lost you to academia.
yeah.
So,
I enjoyed my time
yeah.
in North Carolina. I don't have a bad thing to say about it. It was just a pivot that needed to happen for me, and life changes and all of that. So, but
And you've done well with it. I'm very proud of it.
thank you. One of my questions for you to kind of start off the meat and potatoes of the show is, can you explain a little more? You dabbled in it a little bit about being a GM. Can you explain a little more about that role, but also the leadership development role that you've had with the various higher ed institutions? Because this show really does speak to higher ed and to the professional piece. So take those either way you want, but just give us a little more information about that.
I was involved with Northwestern for 15 years. I have this title at Ole Miss called Director of Leadership Development, which is just sort of a title. I I will help them do things from time to time. I'll be up there in May for a little while to talk to graduating seniors, so forth. Uh, I got into education, specifically executive education, because I worked for a series of terrible jobs and some terrible groups. And when you work in a TV station and you have a terrible job, that person hurts not just the people who work there, but all of their families get hurt. It's a wave, and so I tried to figure out, why are these people so terrible at what they do? I mean, it doesn't seem that hard to me. It's always harder than it looks. But the fact of the matter is, I knew there was a better way, and I wanted to figure out how to do it. And I came to this conclusion. Number one, should the role of a general manager? I believe it should be to help everyone who works in the organization be successful. Because if you can make that happen, the organization is successful and you're successful. The worst thing you can do is to say, I want to be successful, but I don't care about the organization. That's not possible. That doesn't work. So I've been sort of preaching that message for 20 years to general managers. Look, if you want a great television station, if you want to be successful, start with understanding what your job is. Your job is to make sure other people are successful. You start with a department head, and then you make sure that's their attitude. How do you do that? Well, you begin by trusting them. You give them responsibility. You allow them to make reasonable mistakes. You don't allow them to make the same mistake over and over. You're honest with people. If someone is not doing well and you think they're not going to make it, you need to tell them that. I got fired at a job in West Palm Beach at the ABC affiliate, ended up at the NBC affiliate. Why? I wasn't doing well. Nobody would tell me. So I got fired. What? I learned from that experience. It also gave me a heart for people with lost their I no money, wife, one child, she was pregnant. I know what that's like. It's a bad experience. I didn't want that to happen to other people. And so I have this real sense of calling to help better. What I do primarily now, I work with the general manager. First allowed me to do that for them as part of my role. So anytime Hearst would name a new general manager, I would work with them. And I was sort of, and I actually am doing this for Hearst GM right now. Uh, I'm the person you call when you don't want to ask your boss because you don't want to sound stupid, or it's very delicate. And that allows me to do a number of things, reinforce what I think is best practice. Also, the biggest mistake a new GM makes is not being completely forthright with people they work for. If if there's bad news, you have to tell them bad news, and it needs to travel fast because not only do they need to know that, that's what builds your personal credibility. Your personal transparency, honesty builds credibility with the people you work for because it's important that you have their trust so that you can do what you need to do at the television. Uh, I insisted and made it clear when I worked first that I would have authority over the television. That doesn't mean I could do anything I wanted to, but I had some ideas. WXI was a horrible last place station. I had some thoughts on what we needed to do, and they let me do it. Some of it was pretty unconventional, but they supported me, and I love that company. Same thing in Birmingham. And, they're a private company without debt, so they can do that. General managers have to be careful also that they do not usurp department head's role. So if someone comes to a general manager with want them to make certain decisions, there are times when you have to say, wait a minute, if you talk to your supervisor about this supervisor needs to make this decision, not me. Uh, some general managers are micromanagers. They try to know everything in the station. They want to make every decision. Um, there may be someone who's smart enough to do that, but I haven't met them yet. It's, I mean, think about it. You were, which show were you producing? The last one at WXII? Was it the late news?
Yes.
Okay, you're producing the late news. Critically important. If the general manager gets involved and you're deciding what your lead's going to be, that destroys your ability to, because you would be saying, okay, what does the general manager want to lead? What that's terrible. The only thing that you should be asking yourself is, what do I believe the lead should be? And you have that authority. Now you might discuss it with the news director or somebody else, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, you're the one producing the show. You get to decide that. I've known general managers who looked at scripts, who looked at rundown. I purposely did not know everything that went on the TV. Purposely. Anyway, that's sort of a little overview philosophically of how I feel about the job. Uh, there are hard parts of the job. There are hard decisions to make. There's bad news you have to give people. Best way to give somebody a bad news is straight out. You don't sugarcoat it. You don't say something terrible is going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. What I have often done, and I think this is really important role of the general manager. If somebody is failing in their job, rarely because they're not bright, not capable. People who work in TV stations are among the brightest people around. They're very select because it's hard to get those jobs. Why does somebody fail at their job? It's because they're in the wrong job. And I've had many people over the years who were failing, who I would sit down with and you're in the wrong job. You're not enjoying coming to work. You're doing this for whatever reasons you're doing it, but it's not because I can't live without it. And you need to do something else where you. And think about this, if you have someone who, and I've told people this, who I've let go because of this, and it was never a surprise. It was always after many discussions over a long period of time. Said to them, every minute you stay in this job is a minute you're wasting. You need to be spending your time building the career you need. And so that's an important rule. Most general managers they don't want to tell people that. They want to hem and haw, and this hurts me as much as it hurts you. It does not hurt as much as it hurts them. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. I've written a couple of books about this. I sent you one that the book I sent you actually is Hearst sends it to all of their general managers, a couple of other companies, which I'm very honored about.
Yeah, I've been able to go through it, and it's funny hearing you articulate it because I feel like that's the thread that's weaving throughout each one of
Good,
the chapters, even though the chapters are hitting on different things. That
good, good.
that thread is going throughout it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that because that's the point. It's
Yeah.
all about that.
All right. Well, I want to get your thoughts, and you've dealt with students, and in different markets, you may have uh, had younger employees coming in via interns and
Oh,
just
sure.
so. What's some advice that you would give to those students that may be thinking about getting into this field? They're trying to decide right now if they want to major in uh, journalism or something media related, and they're thinking about going into broadcast. What are some things that you would want them to know kind of before getting into this field?
Number one, if you're going to be successful in this business, you need to know what you want. And that's a hard thing to do, but you need to find out. You need to do due diligence. Can be a hard, tough, nasty, difficult business. And it can be difficult to succeed in, and a lot of people fall out along the way. So make sure you fall in love with it, or you don't, or not do it. I've been just working with on a. I work with a lot of people just because they need help, and one is a young woman who's at a station in Tennessee. I've been talking contracts up. They're not going to their second station. They're not willing to pay her as much as she wants to be paid. And she said, if I don't get what I want, I said, uh, I, I'm leaving it. So are you really prepared to leave? Yes. And people say that, So this was last week. This week she's had meetings and she's saying, well, they gave me my best, but no, it's not closed. What should I do? I said, the best advice I can give you is this. Decide whether or not, if you are not doing this anymore, if you decide whether or not you love this so much and would miss it so badly. If that's the case, if you would miss this so badly, if you feel you can't live without it, then sign the contract. But if she had talked about a lot of other things, that if there's something else that you really wanted and you're fine leaving this, then that's your answer too. It's so she's unfortunately making decisions now when she's in her late 20s that is good if she could make in college. How do you do that? One thing you ought to do is reach out to people in the business. You're right next to Nashville. Memphis is not that far away. Knoxville, Huntsville, Birmingham. Reach out. Uh, call news directors. Explain who you are. Say, look, I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking for advice. Can I come see you? And go sit down with some people who they tell me the truth. Or can I spend a day in your newsroom just with somebody? I'm trying to decide if I really want to major it. They'll do that. There are a lot of nice people who do that. And if the person you ask won't, they'll call somebody. Uh, when you graduate from college, knowing what you want to do is massive, massive advantage. Uh, and let me just say this can I talk a minute about getting that job and
Yeah,
so forth?
yeah.
All right. If you want to be on television, understand that's the hardest thing possibly. Most competitive, it most fall out of the way. Uh, You need to start in a small market. People can, and you're not going to make much money, but when you're brand new, well, let me step back. If you want to be a reporter, if you want to be a producer, I've got good news. Salaries are finally coming. Finally. But you still got to work in a small market because you have to learn your craft. And you're going to make mistakes, and you don't want those mistakes to follow you. Know what you want to do, and then understand that working in a small market is not a penalty. Robert, when I worked in West Palm Beach, it was a very small market, 45 years at the ABC affiliate, and we had two of our producers, a guy named Jim Bourbon, a guy named Rome Hartman, wonderful guys. Both saw themselves as investigative folks. They were going to change the world, right? So the local High Line burned down. They decided that they had evidence that the owner had burned it down. And so they did a series of investigations. The owner sued. It cost the station $1 million. Not only that, the station had to buy a page in the newspaper apologizing, saying they were wrong. By that time, I was at the station across the street. I bought a page in the newspaper just before their apology with our anchor team that said, "Use your trust." Okay. Now, today, thanks to the internet, you wouldn't be able to survive that kind of mistake, right?
Right.
But big mistake. But this is a long time ago, and wasn't it? So Al went on to become the executive. When I was at CBS, he was the executive producer at CBS Morning. And Rome was a producer for 60. And he later became producer of the CBS evening. Same two guys. They learned hard lessons. Small markets are important to. How do you get good in a small market? You got to be careful because the other people who work there probably can't help you. Relationships, people in big markets, start when you're at college. Relationships, not looking for a job, but relationships where people work your material. And I think third thing, the one thing that I found over distinguishes every person who does not win, and that's don't give up. People who know what they want to do are willing to pay their dues and are willing not to give up. Basically, job, basically, the other thing are the ones who. And I think that's true in life, no matter what you do. Those who don't give up. I think though I tell students those three things. Most important. Now, there's a lot of stuff, other stuff you could do, like, when you dress for the interview, that kind of thing. How do you learn how to do that? Well, ask somebody who knows, not another student. Ask somebody who knows, suits and ties for the men, dresses or whatever for the women, business clothes. It can be business casual, but not and then be dressed up, but look like a business, look like a and
When
that's
uh,
that's the core message.
yeah, I think that's really helpful. Once the item that you were alluding to or uh, giving an example of kind of dovetails into the next question, which is advice for early career professionals
Yeah.
and helping them navigate some of those challenges in the first few years where I wanted to do this. I really this was my dream job. Now I'm in it, and it may be a little tougher than I thought it was going to be. What's some advice to kind of either help
Well,
them keep going or, you know,
what a
figure
great
something else
question.
out?
Well, what happens, in my experience with those people is they certainly seek help, but they seek help from their contemporaries most many times. So somebody wants to put on a this is where you need relationships with professionals outside the television. So let's say you are a reporter or a producer or some other job. You still you call news director or someone else already in a big market, and you say, "I'm so and so, and I'm not looking at all. But what I am looking for, about 15 minutes of your time for you, just to ask you, and or 30 minutes or whatever you want to ask for, and then decide what you're going to ask. Now, what do I need to do? What should I concentrate? Obviously, you're going to bring your reel, ask them to look at it, but be never allude to wanting a job. Don't ask for a job. Continue when you walk in the door. Say, "Let me just assure you, I'm not here looking for a job. I'm looking here for some advice because of who you are, your reputation, that kind of. You want to be a producer, then find some big market, build a relationship with it. A lot of people are kind of feel privileged to call it. Maybe it's an assistant news director, executive, or an EP, so or or a producer, but it's always in a much bigger place, much more sophisticated. And those are the people who can help you, and you don't have to hire anybody. Just got to invest time and maybe some. I'll tell you something too. Most people never do that. It's amazing to me how few people. I could count on my one hand, the number of people over the years, the 30 years I ran television stations, that just called me and said, "Hey, I'm a student. I'm trying to really decide. Would you mind the, just giving me a half an hour and let me ask you some questions? I don't want a job. I'm not asking for that." The few people who have done it have been incredibly successful, not because they call me, but because they're willing to.
That's interesting. And I don't know if I got that advice early on or I was just bold enough to do it sometimes, but I remember reaching out when I was producing in Jackson to news directors in Atlanta and
Oh, great.
um, and Dallas uh, to get their thoughts because those were two places where I said I'd like to produce in these markets one day. Now I didn't make it to those markets, but I wanted to get on that radar and started showing their stuff, my stuff, to see
Right.
what do you want in that market, and let me start trying to do that.
But you didn't go to those markets because you made a career decision that you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do what you're doing, which is terrific. I mean, you are the embodiment of what I think is critical success. Know what you want to do, and then have the guts to do it,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And if you wanted to do that, you could. When I first got to be a GM, the big thing, be a group head, be a group head. By the time I leaving Chicago, I didn't want to be. Wasn't what I did. It's all about numbers and travel.
Mm.
But yeah, what you did, Keontae, is it worked for you, right?
Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. You're a living example. I'm sure you tell students that too.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely try to pass it along to because you don't know who's willing to help and who will remember that. So
And if you're a student and you are not willing to do that, then this is not the career you want because you don't feel like it. Oh, I just love it. I've got to do it. If you really feel that way, you'll put in the effort.
yeah,
But that's an answer to.
okay.
Yeah,
How about our folks who are on the faculty end would like to go up the leadership ladder, on the professional end would like to pursue leadership? What are some things that they should start to think about, start to look at how to approach climbing that leadership ladder?
you're talking about within a university
Yeah,
or
either in the university or on in the newsroom ranks.
or in the newsroom ranks. I I found that it is very interesting uh, that if you have a group of, let's say, 10, let's say you get to that level you're talking. Now you've already come a long way, right? You've already lifted yourself up, and you're not kid anymore. You're not you're professional doing. There are also 10 other people who've also done the same thing, who are also like you, bright, capable, and work hard to get. Why should you be distinct? I think the answer is you find something to make yourself, and it's something that you're willing to do and they're not willing to do. And I know a great example of it is what you're doing right now. What you're doing right now is you have said, here's something I can do that will be helpful to people, that can embody my academic and my professional experience and bring all of this together and allow me to broaden something. Plus, you're building a reputation. And so when people think of Dr. Coleman, they think, oh, yeah, he does that great show and he brings all these people in. That makes a real difference. It makes a real difference. Same way on the professional ranks. I've been people who are ready to be candidates for general manager. I tell them all the time, find something to distinguish yourself. Find something you do that is a asset to the company. Hopefully, that's something that could be used other places, but at the very least, shows that you're willing to do things that are different and beyond.
I like that. I like that. I think um, the information that you said is something that it takes a while to understand
Mhm.
that piece. But I think when you do, things become a little clearer for you.
Yeah, in my own case, I was in Washington, as I mentioned. I was at the CBS station, and this was so long ago that Nielsen and Arbitron were putting in overnight rates. Okay,
Okay.
this is a long time ago. This is 1983, and I got to be a GM in '88. This was '83, and nobody knew overnight ratings, brand new thing. There had been national over years, but not in the local markets. Washington is one of the top 10 markets, and so we were getting it. And Gannett owned a number of other large market stations at Denver and Phoenix, who were eventually. So I called Nielsen and Arbitron both, and I asked if they said, "Do you have some kind of a book that explains this?" And so both said, "Yeah, we can send you a book." So but this, well, I read the books. I didn't know anything about it, but I read the books, and so I now was positioning myself, answering questions about overnight ratings. So I found myself at a general sales manager's meeting for Gannett, New York, in which I was presenting uh, how overnight ratings work, and that was the way I distinguished myself. And and then other things came from it. But that was a simple thing to do. But I just so happened nobody else did it. So sometimes it's just that simple. Something nobody else does is
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I completely agree. How about this one? Advice for professionals who may be in other industries that would like to get into the media world. What are some thoughts on that?
Tough thing to do. Um, Depends a lot on what you want to do to get into media. There are, of course, musicians who got on TV. There are attorneys. There are other professional people who are able to take that skill and use that, put them in the business. You occasionally get people who are generalists as far as management leadership who come into the, but wow is a tough transition because we really are a different kind of an animal. We run on energy and culture. And I've heard so many stories from general managers the past couple of years of workforces just devastated by because you go on a station and you're to the energy drive. And one of the ways you know a station is a doing well is that energy. If the station doesn't have that energy, it's flat, you know, it's the problem. So it's possible to do, but it's difficult to do. It's probably the toughest thing you can. Again, if you want to do it badly enough, some people have made the transition, but you almost have to have some sort of special ability to make yourself.
That's fair.
Yeah.
The the
It's
area. Oh,
let
go
me
ahead.
just, it's like going into education. I'm not an academic. I don't have a PhD. If you really are serious about it, that you do what you did, do all the hard work and time and effort. If you're not willing to do that, then, no, you're limited.
Gotcha. The show is called Breaking News with Media Leaders. So I'm asking all my guests to come on and break some news for us. So that can be with you, that can be within your field. What news can you break for us, Hank?
There are too many television stations doing news. We're way past the point that we should have had consolidation of television stations. The reason there are so many is there's so much money that comes. I just published a piece this week in TD News Check. I have a regular column there called the Price Pool. Um, Advertising is no longer the number one funder of television. Advertising never recovered 2009. Television stations stay in business now by getting payments from cable. And without that money, they couldn't stay in business. And so that money is threatened. Advertising is threatened. It is a shrinking business. The only reason we have not had a lot of stations just simply sell to each other, shrink the markets, is because the FCC will not allow four highest rated stations in a market to buy. So from a practical point, ABC, CBS. But there are exceptions if you have failing stations, and that's why a market like Tupelo, you and I were talking privately about them. You have one owner of the NBC, the ABC, and the Fox Company. You couldn't do that in Nashville. You couldn't do that in Huntsville. You can only do that in a very, very small. But uh, we have a Democratic administration, and therefore, anyone that wants rules loosened, get it. That's not going to happen. So understand that if you're going to go in this business, TV is not really the future. That doesn't mean you don't have a future, because opportunities are massive because of internet, our websites, the way things are changing, the way things are going. I think we're going to end up eventually with a market. A big market will have two stations, a small market will have one maybe. But the good news is, and bad news, they'll be like newspapers used to be, in that they'll have big staffs to be able to do things. They'll be far more than TV stations. They will truly be information centers. More of what they do will be on, high-speed internet. Uh, I'm sure you know that Next Gen TV, which is built right now, that what we have on the air now, our 1080p, is called ATSC 1.0, skipping to brand new system. By the way, is not compatible. You either buy a new TV or converter. But the new system offers incredible opportunities we've never had before. Addressability to individual, two-way communication, 4K, 8K and beyond, picture quality, uh, full integration into home. Some cases have the ability to act as the home primary device. Higher, everything that we do now is going to become simpler. If you ask consumers, what do you want when it comes to phones and iPads, and say one thing: oh, simplicity, simplicity, ease of operation. Everything's going to voice. In the future, the business 10 years from now that your students will be working in, the person will come home at night, and their ATSC 3.0 system and all of the other things which they have in their home know what they would like to watch, and will say, "Would you like this? Would you like that? Would you?" And you'll communicate with it, clear language. You say, "No, I'm tired. Give me the latest news." On demand. There it is. Live. TV stations will need to, or be able to be producing live news 24 hours. And because everything will be on demand. The networks have already decided that their affiliations with television stations are not as important to them. Their OTT service, putting more money to the development of OTT programming. They're trying to shift their audiences from television to over the top. If you watch CBS, you will see on CBS and Paramount Plus. Paramount Plus has everything CBS has, including local television. The Peacock, exactly the same thing. ABC, Disney, Fox, same thing. All of them are determined. Television over the air is important. It's not going away, but it's going to radically change. A television station, there will be few of them, but a television station that today, of course, we can multiplex multiple channels, but one in the future will make that look like nothing. And it will, 5G is a game changer. Now, what the phone companies calling 5G is not real. What the phone companies have done is they've simply taken all their cell towers, put 5G transmitters. You happen to be close to one, it's going to work. Real 5G has a transmitter on every block on the telephone. Real 5G faster than any wired internet. And so, as part of this, the whole world becomes wired. Self-driving cars are all about 5G. They'll talk to each other. Television becomes central all of a sudden, all of this, because of the localism. Somebody has to have control. And the local role will be what we now call television. And so this is an exciting future. It's something I won't live to see probably, but you will, and your students will work in it. They will have opportunities that we can't even conceive of in every manner and every way. Everything they do, though, will be far more personal than it is. And the systems will be so integrated with each other that in your home, it's not just your alarm system and all of that, it's the coffee pot, the refrigerator. All of these things now, they're just sort of curiosity, like a refrigerator that will say, I'm out of milk. Now forget that. It'll be connected to whoever it needs to be connected with, and somebody will deliver it and put it in the refrigerator for you if you like. There was a time when people were not willing to pay for these services. That time is long gone. You look at what families pay, cell phone, internet, television, you know the list. Look what you pay. They're going to pay more and more and more. And what we're seeing now, this shift already, advertising to direct consumer payment. That's what the OTT network service, shifting from advertising to being paid by the consumer. Advertising will still be around, still matter, still important. It's already secondary payment. And so if you have satellite or cable, on that bill, part of that money is going to the local television. Just like a part of it is going to the Discovery Channel. And so this whole new world that right now we are at the leading edge of the transition. ATSC 3.0 is sort of the beginning, bedrock. The beginning actually was the original digital transition. Original digital transition was put in the infrastructure because once you have digital infrastructure, you can do anything with it. But the over-the-air component was not as advanced back then as it is now. And it was not upgradable. Thus, we're having to go through this new, officially ATSC 3.0, but the industry calls it next gen TV because they think it sounds good. Right? But the reality is, there are a lot of other competitors trying to do the same thing. So Uh, I don't know who's going to win, but I think of the future pretty easy to see because we know what consumers want. They want on demand, they want simple, they want convenience, they don't want to know about technology, they don't want to know how things, they don't want to have to plug in their, they don't want to know about mags, they don't want any of that. And so what the consumer wants is what technology. So I think the future is incredibly exciting for someone who wants to go into the, they need to understand the business they're going into is going to be very different. What do they do about that today? There is something. Do the same thing that I did in college 55 years. Learn to write, learn to speak, learn to think logically. Those are the important things. Learn to communicate. Learn those skills. Know those skills. Being in a media class, television is a great place to learn all of it because you taught those things. Speak correctly, write correctly, think logic. Come out of college with those skills, you're prepared for anything that comes. Anything. People who don't have those skills are never. So for years I was a pessimist about the future of the business because what was happening. I'm now an optimist uh, simply because broaden your horizons, you see that that is very exciting.
That is awesome. That's a lot to take in, but it's a line that you can really, if you pull back and you're paying attention, you can easily see it. So thank you for sharing that because I think that's a perspective that I don't know that I have heard anyone articulate like that. So I will definitely be sharing that with my students.
Well, we all get so busy. We all have so much. Don't have stop and step back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and running stations in such a way as I did, I had plenty of time to think. Because other people were doing all the work. And now that's really my job is just, but when you look at, as you see, all you have to do is look at it and it's there. How do you figure out the future? What does the consumer want? All it takes. What does the consumer, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you want, you're going to get.
Gotcha.
And
The the next question that I like to hit on is talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion within local TV, but TV news in general. How do you feel the current state is, and what are some of the future goals that they should have?
well, it's suddenly become far more important over the last two, for obvious reasons. Everything that's going on. When I worked for Gannett, Gannett was really created by a guy named Al Genius. And he built the largest newspaper chain in the country, built one of the largest television, other things. He created USA Today. And Al used to say, if we're going to run a media organization, we need to look like the people. Because if we don't look like the people we're serving, we're not going to understand what. And I think that was good advice then. And if you don't have a diverse workforce, you don't have inclusion, trouble. Because you're going to have a group of people who think the same. By the way, I left out something. related to this, very important if you're running a TV station. You must have people in that station who are willing to stand up and say something, tell you the truth. That's a big. If you don't know the truth, you will go and you'll go down a road and you'll do something. I can't tell you the number. I've seen that happen. I've been part of it. Everybody thinks it's a great idea, right? I remember when I was a program director, uh, Joan London had a new show. There were two big shows, that and Regis had a show. And we all decided, everybody in the industry, that Joan London is the show. That's the one. What we didn't think about is we were all men making that decision. So I made a deal for the show, and then I said to the syndicator, "Look, this is going to be fine, but I want you to come." He was in New York. Come down to Washington. We're going to get a bunch of women from the station, and we're going to show them the show, and we'll buy them lunch. You and I are going to. Oh, we came back from that lunch. They hated it. They hated everything about it. No. Why? Because we didn't know what we thought. They were sure what to tell us. So that's true whether it be sex, race, age, anything else. You know, if you're full of nothing but young people, then you have no sense of history. Too many young people don't know anything about history. Is critical. In fact, I tell people who are students who are media, please learn history, know the past, know what happened, because the things that you're not the first person to see these things. You're not. So it matters. It's very hard to do. It takes a lot of effort because you have to bring in people who I worked for Ron Townsend for a year. Have you ever heard of Ron Townsend? Ron Townsend, president of Gannett Television. He was my boss, and he was the first black member of a government. So, in fact, I saw him on TV this Sunday. He was there. Congratulations. And the Ron used to say, there are two kinds of people that you can hire. You can hire qualified. You want to hire qualified, but you can also hire qualifiable. Don't hire somebody who's not qualifiable. And that served him very well. You know, Washington, like Jackson, Mississippi, majority black now. Therefore, if you're running TV, your staff needs. And I was at WAPT visiting the general manager recently. I observed that. No, that is so appropriate that in Jackson, Mississippi, their staff looks like and by the way, they are approaching the number one all these.
Really?
Yeah. Hurricane Katrina, during Hurricane Katrina, Hearst sent in 3 helicopters, 7 live trucks, 100 people from the country.
I was there.
You were there, right?
Yeah.
You were part of that. That was the beginning.
Yeah.
And you recall, how long did you stay on the air without any commercials?
162 hours, I think it is. So it was really like a full week without commercials.
And everybody else was commercials the next day. That was you look at all the research, that was because people were looking for coverage they could only find on WAPT. And now, all these years later, paying off.
That's wonderful. That's
It is wonderful. I mean, you can take some of the credit for that because it was the job that you guys did. I was there for a little while. You know, the GM, Stu is still a good friend of mine,
Mm-hmm.
and him from New Orleans, both exhausted. The company looked around and said, "Who could we send down there if something happened to me?" We could do a program about that sometime, couldn't we?
Yeah, yeah. That
Talk about crisis management.
that was something else. That was something else. Like I definitely I don't go a semester without sharing something from that time with my students.
Yeah, armed guards with automatic weapons, film crew.
Yeah.
What an amazing time. Helicopter went down, everybody was scared to death.
I had an anchor that started crying because she was like, I can't take something else. And she was on the air and I was in her ear, like, what are you doing?
Call out the I
And I
love
had,
it.
and we had to scramble and I just got the one shot and was like, let her get off the desk.
A lot of people's career very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was there's no question it was seminal. You know, I point to the assassination of John Kennedy as television,
Mm-hmm.
and because and I was a kid, but I watched it. What we saw television. Before that, it was and Hurricane Katrina was a seminal moment. Certainly not that,
Mm-hmm.
but a seminal moment.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, WDSU had the same advantages. WAPT took advantage of it. WDSU still struck. Get there. So it's fascinating. Case case study. You should write it. You should write a case study of that.
I've never thought about it, but now that you say it, yeah.
You know, listen, let me challenge you. That would be a great book. A great book about journalism.
Yeah.
You can find the people, and not just the Hearst people, but the New Orleans people, the uh, the the people, other people in Jackson, down in everybody, the executives.
Yeah.
But you know, you need to do that.
Yeah.
Only some.
You've added something to my bucket list, Hank.
I
Because I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. Yeah, that's definitely a story from this vantage point that needs to be told and documented.
found that book, History of Journalism.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah, yeah. Look how much stuff you had to figure out. There was no gasoline,
Oh
no
my
gas.
goodness.
I came in with a plane load of New York firefighters and found a rental car somebody turned in because there was no gas, so just whatever was in the car. Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
I wasn't there in the worst stuff. You were there for the worst stuff.
Yeah. It was an interesting time. There was someone had made a deal with one of the gas stations and they gave our station a heads up when they had something, and we had a caravan of employees taking each other's cars for the ones who couldn't leave, like taking their cars to go get filled up. So
And you
yeah.
had significant damage in Jackson too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was a story that started down on the coast, but it went north of Jackson.
Yeah. Just a couple of more questions and I'll let you get on your way. The thoughts on conflict resolution. These are issues that I try to talk with my students about a good bit and colleagues, and just different approaches. I know there are tons of ways that people approach conflict in the newsroom. So, just some of your tips, strategies that you would pass along to folks.
Well, it's a huge issue. It's not one that I have thought a lot about because, it's been a long time since I was in the newsroom, but it's a big issue. And uh, the first thing you've got to do is try to, if when people are upset, they're not going to think logically. They're not, you've got to diffuse, got to get everybody down there. My, my son, who's a pastor, is interested enough. He got called in just last week. Terrible situation. And these were a bunch of Christians who were just a bad, bad situation. And he walked in and he said, everybody just calm down and let's pray. Now, you can't do that in newsroom, right? But for that situation, he said, just wait a minute. Let's just step back and do. Uh, I found times I've been involved in something like that, a version of that. Say, wait a minute, I'll take a second. Everybody take a breath. Nobody's saying it. Everybody just take a deep breath. And then we're going to talk one in a while, and you're going to get to say whatever you want. All take a deep because, but conflict is tough there, especially the long term conflict. So many egos in the newsroom. You've never seen them, I'm sure. If you're on television, it screws with your head because everywhere you go, people recognize you. People are nice to you because people act like you're smart, attractive, right? Because you're on TV. They're really sending you a message, and that is you have value because you're on TV. That's not why you have value. You're in the being with soul. That's your value. You don't have value because you're on television. But when you're told that over and over and over, and let's say for 20 years, it's hard for that message not to get to you. And then what happens when you look at the overnights ratings? Think what that does to you. And you say, wait a minute, what they don't like me anymore. It's very personal and incredibly personal. A lot of conflict comes from that. You've heard anchors, in particular, many times say, look, I'm the one that's sitting out here that everybody's seeing, but you're making the mistakes, right? But I'm the one they see. They tend to be thin skinned, not necessarily because they want to be, but because that's what the job does to you. People also think if you're an anchor, you make more money than you. And that's a problem too, because sometimes you anchors are tempted to live beyond their means. So if you're gonna be on the air, you got to understand real risks to personal because you uh, and if you get caught in that, you're gonna have conflict because now it's your ego that's speaking, not your and Dan Rather always kidded himself that he was just a simple. He wasn't a $7 million a year anchor who flew a private jet, but he kidded himself. Uh, it devastated him. I'll tell you who was destroyed when they were taken off TV, and I was Walter Cronkite.
Hmm.
It killed Walter Cronkite. He became an angry and bitter old man. And even though he was on the CBS board, he lashed out against it. And he was coming to Chicago one time and wanted to get this place called the Oak Room. He had a book and he wanted to know if he could use it. Of course he could, our PR person. I turned as many people out as possible, right? And people gave him a standing ovation. And he almost teared up. Walter Cronkite, but he thinks nobody cares. The last time I saw him, I didn't know him, but I was at Black Rock in a meeting. And that building over a series of owners, they cut so many employees. They had floors that were almost empty. Well, I was in a budget meeting, one end of the floor, and at the other end of the floor was Walter. He had an office. He had a secretary, but he was all by himself. And I went to the restroom, and there's Walter in the restroom, sort of a lonely old man. Walter Cronkite? Because what the business has done to him. You read in the paper that you're the most trusted man in America. That sounds like a good thing, not a good thing. So there are real downsides to understand about. And Lester Holt used to work for me in Chicago. And the way Lester got into NBC was the ratings were terrible. Lester is a wonderful, I mean, a truly wonderful. He's got a great family. He is just a good guy. But his ratings were terrible. And he was making $950,000. And contract was up, and he was doing one newscast. I said, Lester, I can't keep paying you. I want you to stay. I don't want you to go away, but I can only pay you $650,000. It devastated. He ended up going to MSNBC, $180,000. Now he's done great because he's Lester. Hard worker. He earns his keep. He does all that kind of stuff, and he with it. But I ran into him in the Detroit airport after he'd gotten the nightly news, and I said, Lester, I'm so proud of you. Look what you've done. Well, he was still hurt. Top of the world. Best job you can have in the business. He is a good guy. So Walter Cronkite was a good guy. I like to say Dan Rather was a good guy. But that's another story. But there are real downsides to it. And then there are the people who can't handle it, who end up involved with sexual indiscretions. How many of those have we know about? Now look at the Today Show. It's all related. Power and not power, but fame and money are very dangerous, very risky. And you have people who you will train over the years, who you will teach, who are going to be very, very successful. Someday they're going to know exactly what that means.
Thank you for sharing. I think those are pieces that are hard to articulate a lot of the times unless you've been in the position like you've been in to witness it over the years and have kind of that intimate knowledge of it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's not a very upbeat thing to say, but it's very real.
Mm-hmm.
I also like to say to people, no, they look like us, they sound like us, they talk like us. Because the public has changed. They want to change.
That's interesting.
Well, it's exciting business. There's a lot to do. There's a big future for people who have that future. Some of the people work with have that big, uh, but it's always been a tough business. It's going to be, and I think don't go into it unless you know you love it.
Got one more to hit: negotiating contracts and salaries. What are some of those tips, tricks, things that you would want young employees to know, things that uh, mid professionals should know when they're coming in and they're talking about, I need more? What are, from your seat, what are the things that you're evaluating and thinking about?
Well, from a leverage point of view, if it's your first job, you have no. They're going to pay what they're going to pay in contract. Contracts are always. They have non-compete clauses in them. Non-complete clauses are not valid in every state, or they're not others. In most states, they can be broken, but stations will honor each other's fee, just simply because each other's not fee. So be well aware, uh, and because the contract limits you, when you get ready to, first place to look for a new job is within the company working in. When you get ready, I'll get to your answer, but this is part of it. Uh, get the first job, you're going to have a contract that constrains you. Your second job, the easiest place to get it is within the same company, a bigger station. Contract doesn't hold because it's the same company. Uh, if you want to leave the company, plan far in advance because because the contract has end date, and again, that's to the company's advantage, not yours, because if the contract ends, you don't have a job, you're out of work. You don't want that. You have to be careful timing. As far as negotiating a contract when you're a professional who's got some experience and earned your way, the first thing to do is to uh, be upfront. If you like working at this station, the worst thing you can do is try to be hard edged or something like that. Don't do this. There's a certain range of money that the station can pay. Your job is to get the highest number that's in there. Uh, do your best to find out what similar reporters are making, or producers, or whoever. Do a little work. Try to find that out. Don't ask the people you work with. That's not fair to them. But try to find that out about others. Uh, when you go in, be very complimentary. I love working here. I enjoy it. Like working here, or so forth. Uh, and I would sure like to continue. However, it's very good, difficult to do that on what I make. And I've here first here's what I've achieved. Here's how I've grown. Here's what I'm contributing. Here's what value I bring to the organization. And it's not just your work; it's your attitude too. Are you a good citizen? Support the station. Do you avoid conflict? Do you get involved in a bunch of conflict? Do you avoid conflict? Or do you deal with them in a good and positive way? Are you somebody that's willing to work, willing to volunteer for stuff? You are, list all of that stuff and go over it. If you don't mind, I'd just like to share with you uh, how I see my job. I certainly want to know what you think. but don't be afraid to blow your own horn. And then tell them what you believe is a fair salary. Now, I mentioned that this young woman, I think I did a few moments ago, that I've just been dealing with. We went through that process. Uh, the number she believes she's worth is a number that there's no way they're going to pay. I, I'm not going to say that I did not tell her there's no way they're going to pay. I said it's going to be extremely difficult to get that number because it's too much for the market. Guys, is she worth that? Sure, she is. But if she wants to make that money, she's going at any rate. But it's fine to make the ask, and then uh, it, make sure you don't be confrontational, and no matter what they say or how they react, be professional. Don't get rattled. Don't be confrontational. And if they say no, I can't do that, and so then it's fine to say, okay, but this is really what I believe I'm worth. And could we do this? Could I? Could you give some thought to this? And just tell me what the very most you know. Let's don't go back and forth on this. Tell me what the very most you could do. It's important you have that number because now you can make a decision. Are you going to stay? Or are you going to go? What are you going to do? This young woman got that number. After she'd gone through all of this, uh, her first response was, "Well, no, we can't possibly pay that. You're really toward the top of where we are, what we offered you." And and her answer, which I told her because she said she was willing to leave, was not, "I'm going to leave." Don't say that. Her answer was, "Well, okay, I can understand that, but I'm just going to have to see what other options are before I make it." Never cut yourself off. Never say something you'll regret. Never say something that ends the negotiation. You can always resign. Don't do that during the negotiation. The most you can say, and this is what she said, was, "Well, I understand that. If that's the case, then I just before I can make a decision, I need to what other options?" And I said, "If they say they're going to post your job, the answer to that is, well, that's your decision." Uh, what happened in her case, they had mishandled it initially because they weren't upfront with her about everything. Not professional. To their credit, they then handled it correctly. She went back to the newsroom to her job. General manager and the news director had a meeting. Then the news director came, invited her in his office, and said, "Look, we don't want to really want you. Here is the very most we can pay," which was a higher number. This is, I promise you, is all we've got. I said, "Great, thank you. Thank you. Let me think about it." So they gave her a little Friday. But it's always delicate. A lot of times people ask me, should I hire an agent? You can hire an agent, but you got to pay them the rest of your. And if you're going to pay them 10%, I find it very difficult, very hard. I would find it hard to pay anybody 10% of my salary. There are attorneys who specialize in contract negotiations. There are attorneys who specialize in talent negotiations, who you pay by the hour. They're very expensive, but they're not going to, that's all they cost. Many people want to do it themselves, and that's really up to you how you want to handle that. Some people are just much more comfortable with an agent. But in my experience, I haven't found agents doing really any better than the employee could do. At least with me. I've had agents say, "Well, you got to give me something, please. I got to justify my job." And, I said, "I'm sorry. She's the employee. She has the number. There's not much I can do for you." So, every negotiation is different. And the number one thing a new student needs to know is you got to know, read it, understand it before you sign it, but you got to know it.
Gotcha. I think that's helpful. Uh, One thing that I would like to give you the opportunity to do is if there's anything you'd like to share, anything that you'd like to promote, to push, is open.
Yeah, this may sound uh, naive, but it's really important. Never, never, never compromise your ethics. Never compromise your morals. Lead an upright, blameless professional. Gain professional. Don't take shortcuts. Sometimes things are tempting. All kinds of temptations in this life. Don't do that. This is a business of reputation. Everybody knows everybody else. I promise you. There's 1 degree of separation. That's it. If a general manager or news director is looking, you're applying for a job, they will find out everything there is to know about just by making phone calls. They will start with the news directors in the market where you work. They'll find out your work ethic. They'll find out if you've been in trouble. They're going to find everything. If there is something in your background where you have made a mistake, you're going to have to handle it. If it was a long time ago, comes up, say, yeah, that was terrible. Something current, then you better bring it up. Not immediate, not the first words out of your mouth, but they better hear about it. You make a mistake at work, or you mentioned that, got to come clean. It's the only way to live because it's the only way that you don't have to try to remember. And I have a terrible memory of sometimes what I said. In fact, I tell my wife sometimes when I say something, I'm hearing it at the same time everybody else is. Once you start telling the story, you never get to. So ethics. I don't mean to sound hoity-toity or anything like that, but ethics really, your personal reputation will make your career and destroy your career. I've seen people with reputations of saying, he's pretty good at that. He's okay, but what a great team. What a newsroom leader. This is a person who really got the job. And I've heard people say, great reporter or great anchor, head case. Those 2 words you never want to hear, head case. And that can be anything. It can be a producer, reporter, it doesn't matter. If you're a head case, everybody's going to know it. Nobody's going to hire you. If you are the greatest anchor in the world, maybe you'll still get hired. Still a problem.
That sounds like sound advice.
That's all I got.
Hank, this has been a pleasure. I'm glad we were able to catch up. Thank you for joining the show. I can't thank you enough.
Well, you're somebody I'm very proud of, Keonte. I've told you that a couple,
Yeah.
because you're a great example of someone who knew what he wanted to do and had the guts to. Very few. Good for you, Dr. Coleman. And
Thank you.
it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Everyone, thank you for joining us today. I really do appreciate you tuning in for this now third episode of Breaking News with Media Leaders. Make sure that you're liking this show, subscribing to the channel, and we will hopefully see you back soon the next time. Have a good one. There we go.